All right, we're going to derive the quadratic formula with my Silver1 class. Say hello, Silver1 class.
Hello, Silver1 class.
Yeah, I knew someone would say that. Thank you. All right, so this is what we're looking at right here. This is a quadratic equation, ax squared plus bx plus c, where a, b, and c are, in this case, real numbers. We're going to take this and we're going to get it all the way to the quadratic formula. We're going to use completing the square. So the first thing that I've got to do is I've got to get rid of that a in front of the x squared. So how would you propose I get rid of that a? What would be a good way to do that, do you think? Yes?
You divide it all.
Yep, divide everything by a. Now 0 divided by a, that's easy. What's that going to be? 0. Okay, so I have x squared plus b over a x plus c over a. Now if a, b, and c are real numbers, then b over a and c over a are still real numbers. Okay, it hasn't changed anything at this point. So I'm just following math rules all the way down. Okay? I want you to pay attention though, because this is going to be helpful for those of you struggling with that quadratic formula. So quadratic formula. So I'm going to complete the square, so I've got to get rid of the constant. C over a is the constant. I'm moving it over to the other side by subtracting. So it's x squared plus b over ax. We're going to complete the square, so we're going to be filling in this space right here with something. What do we do to find that something? Well, what do we normally do with the number that's in the b spot to find the completing the square number? Who remembers? Go ahead.
B over 2 divided square.
You cut it in half, and then you square it. Now, how do I cut in half a fraction that's got a variable in the denominator? It's actually really easy. You're just going...
Multiply it by 2?
Not multiply it by 2. You can multiply by 1/2. And what that does is double the denominator. Then we're going to take that and square it. Square the top, we get b squared. Square the bottom, we get a squared. But what's the new coefficient instead of 2? 4. Very good. So you're going to start seeing things from the quadratic formula kind of pop up here and there. And that's what we're actually adding to both sides, is b squared over 4a squared. So we're going to have to do a little bit of fancy math right here on the right-hand side because we want to combine our two fractions. Now, I need a common denominator. So to get my common denominator here, what I'm going to do is multiply the top and the bottom of this fraction by 4a. Why is that going to give me a common denominator? Well, what's a times 4a? 4a squared. So now I have negative 4ac over 4a squared. That's starting to look kind of familiar. Plus b squared over 4a squared. Well, why don't we just combine that because it's got the common denominator? And why don't we just put the b squared in the front of it? Oh, look at that. That looks familiar. All right, but we've kind of neglected the left-hand side. So what we're going to do is, in true completing the square fashion, we're going to write it as the square of a binomial. And that's going to be x plus. Now remember what goes in here. It's whatever we had after we cut it in half, but before we squared it. Anybody see that on the screen somewhere? B over 2a. That's what it is after we cut it in half, but before we squared it. So b over 2a right here. So here's what I've got. And I'm completely out of space. Can I shift this upward? Huh, I can. Okay. So the next step would be for me to take the square root of both sides. So don't let that scare you. We're just taking the square root of something squared. Remember what happens is that kind of cancels out the squared. So I get x plus b over 2a. And on this side, I can't take the square root of this with the difference, but I can take the square root of the denominator. What's the square root of 4a squared again? 2 and a. Does it look familiar yet?
Yeah.
All right, and the other thing is I took that square root. I got to put a plus or minus in front of that radical sign right there. Last thing is to get x by itself. So x equals negative b over 2a plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And now I notice common denominator right here, right? All right, so that means I can take that. Oh, it won't let me scroll up anymore. So x equals the opposite of b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So the quadratic formula actually comes from somewhere. I'm not going to sing the song by myself. You can sing it with me.
Oh,
You ready? Negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. I was pretty much by myself, but thanks, guys. All right. Watch Edmodo for your homework post. I will see you guys on Thursday. And goodbye, video. Bye, video.
Bye.